No,
someone like that.
thank you very much for discussing it for the past few minutes, because it's a wealth of information that wasn't there before, so thank you.
Yes.
Let me read what the comprehensive plan actually says about what happens when that building comes down. What it actually says, it says, in the event that DEC and the village agree to remove the contamination below the building and it is torn down, rethink the use of the entire property from the river to Market Street while ensuring that a reconstructed boat club facility is a part of the resulting plan. It doesn't say have the boat club rethink those uses. It doesn't say that. It's for the village to rethink those uses.
The boat club is part of the village.
I understand that the boat club is part of it, but clearly the referent here is that the village rethinks those uses. And what's happening, excuse me, let me finish.
Please do.
Let me finish. What's happening is you created a closed process because you said that it's going to be the boat club that decides what's on that, and then they're going to do all the legal work, and you're going to come up with a lease agreement. Then you're going to present it to the public as a fait accompli, and it's a waste of time. Why not establish the concept that where the boat club and the community agrees in an open process what should be on that whole site? That's the full site. They agree with to be on the full site, and then work out whatever legal agreement could be necessary to support that agreement. You're putting the cart before the horse. What should be first is establishing the concept of what should be on that site, and then figure out what kind of agreements, what kind of deals, it should be a lease, a long-term lease, a short-term lease, then figure out what that should be to serve the public.
You've misunderstood. Excuse me just 1 second. That is not what's happening. What it is the boat club is to make an offer. It is then open to the village to then look at that offer and comment on that offer. That's when the village as a whole gets involved in saying, does this meet the needs? One thing I think that one concept that we talked about a lot, is when we spoke about this is you got to increase access, right? There's whether or not it's public restrooms, whether or not it's a small boat launch. So they have been directed to look at the comp plan, to look at the LWRS, and to come up with what their strategies. They also need to go back and talk to their members. They haven't talked to their members as the last time we met. So the question is, are they willing to capitalize this, right? Can they come up with a prospectus, right, a business plan that is viable to say, all right, if we do this, we do that, we take in this capitalization, we take in these fees and these work hours, what do we have to offer the village? Because part of the comp plan says generate revenue, right? Currently it's not generating revenue, with the exception of the parking that goes to the Hudson House. So we are asking them to first make what their vision is. That is not saying they are in control, quite the opposite. The village is in control, it's our property. So the question is to put something together that we can talk about. Nothing is closed here. It is really opening it up when there is a meaningful conversation to be had, also respecting the rights of a tenant that has 10 years on their lease that deserves a reasonable process. And that we value their relationship.
The problem here is that there's only one party that's preparing a proposal, where this should be an open process, where the community has an opportunity to shape the plans for that property. And what you've done is you've established a process whereby there's one party that has very special rights to this property, and that's wrong. This is village property. There's a clear statement in the comprehensive plan that says if that building comes down, there's got to be an open process for finding what should be on that property. And what you've done is you've created a very narrow process that doesn't enable that to happen.
But the comp plan also says that, first and foremost, that the boat club should remain operating on that property. It doesn't say that the boat club is not to be using the property, and so starting from that point is a reasonable place to start, and to say to the tenant who has 10 years left on its lease, and it will be there at the end of the process that will include a lot of public input, to start there and say, to the extent that you're going to be using this property, you come back to us and you respond to the issues that you already know are important to the community. that is where the village board has decided to start the public process.
What's happening though is you've got very special narrow interests. They have a special narrow interest in terms of access to the river. And the comprehensive plan completely protects that. Completely protects that interest in that right. And it says whatever happens on that property, that's got to be protected. Meanwhile, the whole rest of the property is not being addressed. If you don't address them at the same time, as a single piece, you're going to end up with something where you're thinking in a very narrow way. And that's reflected, by the way, in your letter to the DEC, that your thinking is very narrow, and you're establishing these, you're locking out options in the future.
I think you're drawing a lot of lines. Go ahead.
Well, how about this?
Let me just address the point about the letter to the DEC. If the DEC is going to place a membrane at some point below the ground where we cannot pierce it with any construction whatsoever, okay? If that's a possibility, then what we want to do is get the DEC to think in advance so that a foundation and footings can be poured at some point. It doesn't say you have to do that exactly in this particular spot. We have to work together to make sure that there is a cohesiveness between the board and the DEC.
But you made a reference to the existing footprint
We did.
as their reference.
We did.
That was unnecessary.
Because
let the
Mike,
attorney
it was
finish.
time sensitive. The letter had to go out. We had to make
We got
a
the
call.
comment from Mark.
Not all calls are perfect. That's, I stand behind the call we made.
Here's the deal. It's village property. We're the village board, and we'll take into consideration the public process. And you know, thank you, but we're going to continue down the road we're going, and we will ask for public input. And just because we're not asking your question doesn't mean we're asking the wrong question. Anybody else? Yes.
Going to lighten the subject up a little.
Thank you.
I had, speaking on the Chamber of Commerce hat, the applications for the music series went in, I didn't hear anything.
There were ones that we put up past that were approved.